Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, from wherever you're watching us from. This is the Fireside, the home of politics, policy, and polity. And today, I have the privilege of enjoying the company of a lady and two gentlemen. With me here is lawyer Moses Chelanga. We also have, for the first time ever on this show, Gachui Kariuki, who is the director of Ustawi and Ustawi-Ke, and a governance expert. She is a lawyer and an advocate of the High Court. So a very pedigree panelist to have today. And finally, of course, I have Dismus Mokua, who is a political risk analyst. A lot has happened in the course of the week, and we are happy that we have a panel that is up to the task. Three major things that we want to look at. One, we want to look at what we call the phone call. You know that Raila, President Uhuru Kenyatta phone call that has caused some sort of an uproar in the public domain. Secondly, we want to look at what Dismus is very passionate about. You know, this diaspora jobs. I think since the inception of this government, we've had these conversations around exporting Kenyans, you know, jobs outside this country. What exactly are we getting ourselves into? What kind of jobs and what is the return on the people who are exporting to other countries? We will get into that conversation. And then lastly, the second cabinet, the Herculean task that is ahead of the ladies and gentlemen who are given the responsibility by the president of this country to steer this country to a new height, a height that will address the grievances that were raised by the Gen Zs. Join us as we have this conversation. Let us just begin with this phone call. President Uhuru Kenyatta allegedly called the Right Honorable Raila Odinga at the height of the Gen Z revolution and told him, you need to sort what is going on, reach out to the President William Ruto, have a conversation. Before Raila even reached out to President William Ruto, Raila says that President William Ruto reached out to him. And now there's a conversation. And I think the conversation revolves around who was thrown under the bus. Was that phone call real? What does it mean to the political dispensation as we speak today? From where I sit, there is a lot. But I think the most important thing is, what is in that phone call for Kenyans? For politicians, they can be thrown under the bus. But if there is something for Kenyans, then I think it's just important that we look at what is it for Kenyans going forward. Was it something that was in the interest of Kenyans? Was it the political class coalescing to protect their own interests? Dismus, do I start with you?
Yes, as if I get the call. In my view, Professor, there are two things we need to ask ourselves and seek to establish. Mr. Raila Odinga said that I received a call from... my apologies. The Right Honorable Raila Odinga has indicated that he received a call from former President Kenyatta requesting him to have a conversation with President Ruto for purposes of ensuring that there is stability in Kenya. So the material question would be, was there in fact a phone call? Or maybe there was no phone call. Now, the Right Honorable Raila Odinga has said there was a phone call whose raison d'etre was to create a political stability. And indeed, there is a political stability in Kenya, assuming that it's actually accurate. Now, for Mora back in Mososho, Mora is waiting for somebody to confirm whether indeed there was a phone call. Because Mr. Raila Odinga has said that there was a phone call. But the sycophants and the cast around former President Kenyatta has indicated there was no phone call. But now the elephant in the room is that the person who has the last word in this is former President Kenyatta. Probably President Kenyatta needs to come out and clear the air and indicate whether or not he made the phone call. Because if the two of them do not give us an appropriate answer, then now we may be required to go and do a forensic examination of their phones and their sycophants to actually establish whether or not there was a phone call. But assuming there was a phone call, you remember President Kenyatta was born in Purple. His father was the President of the Republic of Kenya. And then he's one of the prime beneficiaries of the President Moi's administration, President Kibaki's administration, and his own administration. Probably he looked at the crystal ball and said that if Kenya degenerates further, he would be the biggest loser, and he requested Right Honorable Raila Odinga to make the call. And if Mr. Raila Odinga, on his motion, claims that the call was made, one would seek to establish why is he saying that he received a call. Is it because he's looking at the 2027 general election and they're trying to see how to manage expectations around Mount Kenya? But in my view, all said and done, it matters not who made the call, whether the call was made, but we have political stability. But again, that points to one direction.
Yes.
That we have a number of Kenyans with very heavy political capital, that their views or feelings or perceptions or opinions about anything can compromise Kenya's capacity as a going concern. That we probably in a room, you've got about 5 people who are seated, and one can decide to cause chaos. Because you remember around that time there were allegations that one prominent politician in Kenya, even if I'm in the company of the 2 lawyers, I can't even mention their names because, libel and slander. But it means that there are a few politicians who may want to create instability in Kenya and benefit from that instability. And a phone call would reverse or negate everything.
Gachui, from where you sit, I mean, is it important whether the phone call was made or not? Is it a political game of musical chairs where someone is trying to bring everyone into this very interesting conversation around the political class coming together to protect their own interests? What is your reading of all this?
The legitimacy of the phone call, I cannot contest it. I cannot say if it was real or not between the 3, I'll call them principles, the 3 principles. But what I would like to understand is where exactly were the youth involved in all of this. I represent a demographic, particular demographic, and that's what we do at Ustawi-Ke, youth-led accountability and governance. And my one take, or at least the most curious thing I found from this is, do we call it statesmanship in terms of, we've come together as the principles and we want to pacify the country, we want to pacify the political climate, or do we accept that in fact we do have overlords? You were talking about people who have such political muscle, it affects or it defines where we move forward as a country. It is a going concern, and I think it is also an issue that as a people we should take seriously. How is it that actually people can have that kind of political power and influence and determine how the rest of us live? But then again, it's also an element of statesmanship when you think about it. Remember on the 25th, after the parliament fiasco, the president came out guns blazing, very upset and berated all of us as a nation. And immediately, the former president came out with a statement as well, and he was very this is not how you address the situation. Let us all work to calm temperatures in the country. Let us talk to the people, not at the people. So I don't know. There are 2 ways to look at it: statesmanship or governance.
Professor, before Musa comes in every country in the world, there is a number of persons or political families whose views on anything and everything moves the needle. Like you recall some time ago in South Africa, when Mr. Jacob Zuma was facing a crisis, he was supposed to be, the law enforcement were coming to arrest him, and he went to the top of a mountain and started making a noise, and for a long time there was a crisis in South Africa. There is a country in Thailand whereby the daughter of the former prime minister, who is said to be a billionaire, at the flick of his finger, the young girl, I think she's now 32, she's already become the prime minister. In the US a few days ago, when President Biden, after the debate, people said, wait a minute, is President Biden, is he fit to run the nation? The former Speaker Nancy Pelosi said, wait a minute, he should reconsider his position. And a few minutes later, the President Biden said, I'm out of the race. So in my view, the question would be, is this that we have persons who are more powerful than the established institutions and systems, that it doesn't matter whether you've got a strong political party, strong judiciary, strong national government, strong county governments, but there's one person who can shake those pillars and the nation starts shaking.
But Dismus, the fact that these people who can shake the nation, they cough and the nation shakes, were quiet up to the point where the Gen Z said, enough is enough, and they went to the streets. Brings a lot of questions to the fore. One, where were they when things were going bad. And now that they've come to speak at the point where the Gen Zs are almost turning tables on the political class, are they speaking in the interest of the country? Is it statesmanship, as Wakili says, or is it self-preservation? And probably, maybe you should not even belabor the point of who called who and why they called, whoever they called. Now we have a country, the security that Dismus keeps talking about is now secured. What happens going forward?
Well, as I said, you see, you should start from the premise that what people forget is that in the instrumentality of Azimio Moja One Kenya is that the council of Azimio One Moja Kenya, the chairman is Uhuru Kenyatta.
Former President Uhuru Kenyatta.
Former President Uhuru Kenyatta. And the party, the leader of the coalition. So those are people. And along the way after the election, there was a lot of friction between the coalition on who made Raila lose or who made Ruto win, and whether there was a con game and all that. And you remember early in April this year, during the installation of two bishops, auxiliary bishops, the Archdiocese of Nairobi in Sungari Gardens, Uhuru Kenyatta came out when he was addressing, he's a Catholic like myself, and he said that he picked from the homily of the papal nuncio, who talked about Judas Iscariot and the betrayal of Jesus, and said that there's a betrayal that is happening in the political space. And that was coming out on the heels of NADCO, National Dialogue and Reconciliation, after Baba had gone to streets and to do mandamano on the cost of living, among other things, and reforms and IBC. So that was Baba's mandamano. Then Uhuru said, we have traitors. So the public opinion was that Uhuru was referring to Raila as a traitor. And there was also a conversation, very uncomfortable, that was happening in the public discourse, that Uhuru Kenyatta was actually funding those demonstrations. And that conversation has not even left. People are still accusing him that he was involved in the Gen Z conversation. Whether true or wrong, it is not in our domain. Then Raila now in my own county, of Masit, the father of the late Masit, the former IBC Commissioner Masit, was the father who passed on. And he made these allegations that Uhuru called me and he said, go and talk to William Ruto to see whether we can stabilize the country. And the question was, could Kenyatta, why could he call Ruto? Because his and then also they have to look at it that you see both of these, Uhuru and Raila, are when Raila was the prime minister, he's the one who proposed agriculture in the government of in the coalition government, the National Accord. And Uhuru is the one. So these are people who have worked for quite some time. Such that you see, whether the call, a call is like the Boston tea. A call is very political. So whether people who have not been talking to each other, they call one another, is an issue. But going forward, as you said, as Dismus has said, is that we have stability, relative stability. Then we question them, okay, so who are these Gen Zs who are stabilizing? Was it Raila's Gen Zs? Were they Gen Zs? Or were they Gen Zs who are rudderless, leaderless, formless?
Jobless.
Not, I wouldn't say them heartless, but they were presenting their legitimate grievances. Yeah. But going forward, you see, the thing is that he's mentioned is that this country is a captured state.
Are you saying the three of them have captured us? Or
they have captured
cumulatively?
Us. We are.
Their powers.
We are completely captured. These individuals. When Raila Odinga says that we are not going to the state, then all these agencies will withdraw. When Uhuru Kenyatta says it's okay, when William Ruto says we are not going to have, we want to have peace, when one of them says no, when William Ruto today wakes up and says, we are fighting, the country will fight.
No, but
so these people have captured the polity of the Kenyan nation.
I like the word polity.
Yes.
but
in the sense that, I mean, we don't have a particular direction that is particularly persuaded or directed by any ideology or any form of governance. We are still under the hostage. It's called black colonial masters.
Professor, it's used a lot of English here. Let's take clarity. These politicians, have they captured the state, or they've got an overwhelming political capital, and this political capital gives them power to influence their voters? Like, for instance, it's a well-known fact that as far as Mr. Raila Odinga is concerned, his political base is largely emotional and irrational. When he tells them jump, they don't ask why, they ask how high.
Yes.
Now, is that kind of influence the same thing as state capture, or he has captured the state?
No, the state capture comes in 2 ways. You know, like if you read this book called the State Capture, the Gupta Republic, like how they captured South Africa under the Zuma regime, can come in 2 ways. You can capture a country, people, economically. The Kenyatas have captured this country. So, economically, the Kenyatas have captured this country. If Kenya bans, but they of course have other investments. And there are also other state craftsmanship in the sense of people who are investing in this country, who are interested. You remember in 2007, when there was post-election violence, Gachui came and he was told Kibaki and Condoleezza Rice came and told them, it is in our interest that this country is stable. It is not in your interest.
Yeah? It's in the Americans' interest.
It is in the American interest. It's not in the interest of Kenya. So we are living here. The peace we are having is not in our interest. It's in the interest of other state, non-state actors.
Globalization.
But Wakili,
Globalists, for that matter, including Kenyans who are very few, 1% of this country, who have captured this country. They make the decision for you. They tell you, you must keep peace. Otherwise, we will make you peaceful.
which is a good thing. I mean, if individuals who have political clout
Yes.
also have economic interest,
Exactly.
and therefore because of their economic interest,
Yes.
they will do anything to ensure that there is political stability.
Yes.
For me, it's not a bad thing. The question that probably many Kenyans who are watching are asking, and there are two questions. Dismus has alluded to the fact that Raila Odinga's supporters are emotional and irrational, which needs to be unpacked, because
that one is
yes. I mean, it's a bit on the extreme, unless there is enough evidence to show that they are irrational.
Yes, I'll present the
But
evidence.
on you, I think the critical question here is that if you talk about a family in Kenya having captured the state, the assumption you're making here is that all the activities of the states are actually advancing the economic interest of this family, which might need qualification. To what extent did that happen during Uhuru Kenyatta's regime, and to what extent is it a continuation of what is happening? Because there's a thin line between protecting their own interest and directing all the activities of the state to advance their economic interest, which I think is what happened in the South African case. But having said that, I think there's something very, very interesting here that the two of you have alluded to. So if these three families have come together and the Gen Zs are off the streets, there's that assumption that chances are there were Gen Zs who are on the street courtesy of these three big individuals with political capitals. Yeah? And now that they've come together, what then happens if this truce between the three of them does not address the issues of the Gen Zs and people go back to the streets?
Professor, is that, what we forget in this country, Kenyatta told us that in Swahili.
Which Kenyatta?
The Kenyatta one. Jomo Kenyatta said, tulipigania uhuru, tulinyakua, hatukupewa. But the contrary is true. Is that the British Empire, there was no way the British Empire would have been defeated by ragtag militia. in Kenya,
In the name of Mama.
in whatever name you call it.
Yeah.
They had agreed. Harold McKinnon said that there is a wind of change, so we need to decolonize. And in the decolonization is that there was a brokerage between the ruling class and the, as it were then, between the Kapenguria guys and the what do they call
Home guards.
Home guards. They said, now what we're going to give you independence, but now you have to give us something back. Protect the settlers. Those who are going back, let them go. Those who want to remain, those who are going back, let them. We compensate. They will give you money to compensate them. So it was a negotiated deal.
Yeah.
So there was no real independence. So the guys who fought for independence, like the Mau Mau guys, they lost it all. If you read about Field Marshal by Mogi, General Moirama, and all the other guys, who lost it. And those are the guys who fought for independence. Those are the Gen Zs of the 60s. They lost it because these guys brokered a deal between themselves. The Gen Zs are clueless, as leaderless as they were. But these guys are brokering a deal. They are saying, oh.
The question is, if this deal that they're brokering fails, what happens then?
It won't fail. Because they know they are, okay, they have brokered a deal.
Yeah.
For now, there is a relative truce. But you see, now the thing is that there is a carrot. Because you see, everyone has different interests.
Yeah.
Uhuru can broker a deal. Baba can broker a deal. Ruto can broker a deal. And all those other kinds. So now the thing is that what I'm saying, that the power elites have captured us. So what we saw in the independence, what we saw in the Young Turks movement of the 90s, when Akina Kiraitu Murungi, Tobu Manyara, Paul Muiti, and others were there, is that the guys were negotiating. And they said we want multi-party democracy. But when Somalia was in fire, the Americans talked to Moi. They said, no, we need to use Kenya to attack Somalia. And then the funding that was going to the Young Turks, they were thrown under the bus. And then they say they supported Mzee Moi.
Yes,
so now the statecraft that is established or that is set as the Kenyan state is that it is not meant to serve you guys. It's not meant to serve Kenyans.
You know,
it is a negotiation of a cabal of elites who they decide and agree what they want for you.
You know, Wakili, I totally agree with you. And let me come back to Wakili.
Yes.
The question that is critical here is that what you are saying seems to be putting all of us Kenyans to this room where we have no exit and we are confined and there is no self-determination for us. We cannot decide. Once they've brokered a deal, that deal will work. And even if it doesn't work, there is nothing in it for us and there is nothing we can do. Which, from where I sit, I think is the misinterpretation of what the political class is doing today. They're unleashing the same script, not knowing that the audience is not the Moi era audience. When you talk about the Young Turks, and you've deliberately chosen to pick Young Turks from Mount Kenya,
Yes.
3 names, but I think there were so many. But the point I'm seeing here is that we are running away from the reality that it's a new dawn. You know, when you see young people on these social media platforms walking around talking about this project was launched, nothing has been done, this project was and Kenyans are coming out saying, please continue doing what you're doing, we'll crowdfund and for you so that you go round. You know, there's a new consciousness, and I'm sure Wakili, you can put it in a better way.
Yeah, I was actually going to pick up from what you were saying. Practically speaking, liberties exist for us to go so far, but not far enough. And the 1%, the cabal we keep talking about here, will always ensure that determinations will ultimately end up in their hands. But at the same time, technology has become a disruptor in how things are working across the world, in every field, including politics. Yeah. You saw how this Reject the Finance Bill started off, to the extent where young people started curating content on social media where they're translating the finance bill in their mother tongues and ensuring that even the older folk who might not necessarily be able to understand Swahili and English are able to do that. They were mobilizing one another on Telegram, on WhatsApp. They have an app, a walkie-talkie app. It's called, I think it's called Boom. Hello is a drug.
It's a legit one. Just
What is this former altar we telling us about drugs?
But there's a walkie-talkie app.
Yeah,
They were
yeah.
using a radio signal app to coordinate their movements.
That's the one.
Exactly, just to know where the law enforcement is, where the state is, how do we move, how do we hide. Crowdfunding, you saw they even came up with a medical camp
Yeah.
in the CBD. Things have definitely changed. And Wakili, I think his name is Wakili Morara, the gentleman
Yeah.
who's going around the country relaunching, sarcastically, relaunching the president's projects. Kenyans have been seeing what he's doing, and they are calling it, the crowdfunding, they're calling it kutuma za cabbage. So anatumiwa za cabbage so that he's able to move around better, getting advice from a lot of people on how to move around to ensure the state does not catch up with him. Now the Gen Zs are also picking up on that. I saw a couple of videos on TikTok yesterday, actually, of very young girls who have said, picking up from what Morara is doing, but also going to start looking at our CIDPs or CIPDs, County Integrated Development Plans. And everyone is looking at their sub-county, their ward, their constituencies. Okay, what was the county government supposed to do for us? What have they launched? How much money has been dispensed? And what exactly is happening? So, yes, we do have an elite group that ultimately determines a lot. This conversation on civic education and self-determination is
it's a new dawn.
Yes.
nowhere near over.
Yeah, I want to buttress our point, and also the point raised by the former altar boy about the leadership in Kenya. How do we get our leaders? Every 5 years we go for a general election, but we get a list of people to vote for from political parties, and most of the time the political party primaries cannot be described as free, fair, nor credible. In fact, most of the political parties in Kenya give the party leader the yam and the knife. The political party leader can determine who is going to run for which seat, whatever it is. And the majority of Kenyans do not participate in party primaries. So you end up, you're given a list of 5 by the major political party leaders, and then you pick whoever you want during the elections. And then you actually convince yourself that you've got freedoms to elect our leaders, while in fact, you've not taken part in party primaries. We need to ensure that as a nation, that it's fashionable for you to be a member of a political party. Majority of people in Kenya, you ask them, are you a member of a political party? A few in ODM or ANC would probably say yes. But right now, you go to the streets and ask people, are you a member of Jubilee? Nobody will indicate. Unlike in other democracies, like in America right now, people are coming up and say that I'm a Republican. People are saying that I'm a Democrat. People are happy to do that. So if we do not address the fundamental issue of political parties, you become proactive, then we'll keep on endorsing a list that has been made public. And then Professor has asked a very valid question. That with all these, of course, yeah, with all these phone calls, is the administration addressing the Gen Z issues? Every single Kenyan today, whether or not you've gone to school, whether or not you understand politics, you know that if you do not address the issues as raised by Gen Z, then you're creating an environment for political instability. And the Gen Z have demonstrated that they can actually cause political instability. When you cause political instability, these powerful politicians you're talking about, not only will they lose their power in Kenya, but their bank balances are going to be affected. And human beings operate on this principle called pain and pleasure. So Gen Z has inflicted a certain level of pain in the ruling class, in the political class. For the longest time, in the morning traffic, and for some reason, these public servants of rank, they wake up late and they're always in a hurry. They kept on keeping, driving people out of the roads.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen anymore. Before Gen Z checked into town, there was this obnoxious, arrogant display of wealth. It has gone down.
Opulence.
Yeah, opulence, yeah. Before Gen Z checked in, public participation was mechanical and it was ceremonial. But the Gen Z have said, wait a minute, we need to work on this issue. But on the flip side, we witnessed a lot of misinformation and disinformation, and Professor would add malinformation. Yeah, because up to 90% of the contents of the finance bill were very solid. In fact, Mr. John Mbadi, when he was being interviewed for his role at the National Treasury, he said that a good part of the finance bill was solid, but because he's a member of ODM and the party had taken a position, he had to rubbish everything. A few days ago, you noticed a gentleman by the name Wycliffe Oparanya, who is a PhD candidate. Before he got nominated, he said to hell with the Kenya Kwanza administration. As soon as he was sworn in, he goes to the top of Mount Kenya, Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Everest, and he makes a confession that having sat in one meeting, I've discovered Kenya Kwanza is full of red roses.
Damascus moment.
Yeah, Damascus moment.
The Damascus moment.
There's a fellow, an MP for Alego, Atandi, says that government is only bad when you're not inside. The moment you're inside, then everything is okay. Opio and I, the cabinet secretary for Elijah, said, never again will you be outside the government. So you can actually see that our politics in Kenya is marked by deceit. That when you don't have a flag, when you don't have the political power, then it's a case of sour grapes. And I think it's time, Professor, that the two Achilles educate Kenyans that when you're talking about government, government includes the national executive, government includes the judiciary, and government includes legislation. Because you get an MP who is a lawyer, who is an engineer, who is a professor like Owilla, saying, sahi tumeingia kwa serikali, and yet he's an MP, he has a position of leadership, and he runs around in a GK vehicle. Then you begin to wonder, how can you be a member of the National Assembly and you don't understand that in the Kenyan presidential system, we only have a minority and a majority. So it doesn't matter where you sit.
I saw Kaluma saying that no one should ever refer him as an opposition MP, because there's no that position in the Constitution. Brings me to this question. What is being in government? We've been socialized in a way that being in government is being in cabinet.
Yes.
And we only have 22 slots. For how many people can we fit into government?
50 million Kenyans.
Yes. So how many people? Should we have 50 million cabinets?
So that we have government.
That's what we're all in government. Or should we have 47 so that every county will have? Because you see, I had a conversation with this guy. He said, the way we were brought up in Kenya is that we have been socialized to the fact that being in cabinet, being in government means that you have your own. ODM has 6 members of cabinet.
Who they refer as the top brains.
Yes, they are talent which they outsourced to Kenya Kwanza. So they say now they are in government. So now, what is being in government? Can we, because it's a placebo effect, in my sense that if Opio and I is a cabinet secretary, it does not bring anything to the table. It does not bring anything to the people who have a constitution.
No. Okay, on the contrary, it does.
Listen to me.
Wait.
What is it? What is it? It is only him and his family and his coterie of his advisors
and that is his salary.
And others. But there's nothing. But you see, it is a placebo effect. There's a placebo effect. You see, when you give me, you can give me a vaccine of water. And then if it is in my mind, it means that it cures me. I may actually heal. No. The placebo effect is that you see, you inject people with water, thinking that you are healing them. But there's nothing you're doing. But so now, what are we doing with the rest of the country? That should be my proposal. That, okay, let us kick this door open widely. Let us increase even the number of cabinet secretaries. So that every community now can have a cabinet secretary. And we
Before Gachui comes in, let me buttress a quick point here. It's a well-known fact that there are many parts in Kenya that saw tarmac after devolution. While, and I'm going to use my street language here, well, tarmac was a normal occurrence in parts of central Kenya because the presidency. We are actually told that in parts of Rift Valley, there was a tarmac road, and because there was no commerce, people use the tarmac road to drive their maize, and occasionally their livestock go and take a break. Yeah. And while then in parts of Kenya, including Kisii, Garissa, Mandera, they saw a tarmac road after devolution. When you look at the road policy in Kenya, there's actually no road policy on which road is going to be tarmacked. It depends on who sits where. So you may not really say that these people do not understand the role of a cabinet secretary, because when a cabinet secretary comes from a particular village, he gets the opportunity to assault the constitution, assault chapter 6 and article 10, and have folks from his neighborhood joining, getting plan positions, joining all these kind of things. So it's something that we cannot, place under the table. But I would understand why you're very defensive.
But Dismus is taking this position pursuant to his stand last week that there are cabinet slots that are more lucrative than the other. And I think there's an echo of corruption in all that.
Yes.
That if they're going to assault chapter 6 of the constitution, use their positions to benefit certain regions because they belong to those regions, then that is the Kenya that the Gen Zs are saying no to.
Yes.
But for purposes of moving this conversation forward, Martin Luther King Jr. wrote a number of articles and essays. One that he wrote when he was in a city hall jail, called A Letter from the Birmingham City Hall Jail, asked this very critical question. So from here, where do we go? There was a letter, there was a call, there was no call. People agreed, people did not agree. But where do we go? Briefly, before we move to the next point of discussion. Yeah.
Fidelity to meritocracy is where we go. If you're a Kenyan, you must feel that you're a Kenyan. I've got some of my friends from where Mr. Chelanga comes, up north. They live in Kenya, but when they get to Kitale, they say, now we are going to Kenya. They don't consider themselves to be Kenyan. So I think when you're a Kenyan, when you're a taxpayer, and when you vote, then you must be treated as a Kenyan. And still considering, going to Martin Luther King said that you shall not be judged by your name or your color or your race. Let meritocracy. In other words, we must place a premium on equality and equity. And of course, the lawyers will say you must respect the constitution. But the most important thing in my view is that for Kenyans, the moment you get to the age of 18, register as a Kenyan, take a vote, and when you're going to cast your ballot, please run with the ideologies and set yourself free from these shackles of tribalism. If we don't do that, then you're going to be in a horrible place.
Allow me to just pick up from what was said earlier. We have a culture of politics in this country is cutthroat, and it is very punitive. So that's why we've been conditioned to think the winner is a take-all kind of win in this country. So that's why the Mtuwetu syndrome will not be going away anytime soon. So how the reaction when Mbadi was named as a nominee, Joho was named as a nominee, people came out in the streets and they were celebrating, and these were areas that were also hotspots for protests a week earlier. And it was like,
actually, people in Kisumu said, somebody was interviewed in Kisumu, said, why should I do the demo na sisi tuko ndani ya serikali?
It does not make sense. So until we get to a point where it only matters that you are Kenyan, it does not matter where you come from. You will get your development, you will get your health services, you will get good education, you will get good facilities. Until we get to that point.
But okay, somebody will say that is actually theory. Lakini kwa ground vitu ni different.
And I think that's what Ugatuzi came to cure. Although I don't think it has managed to do it in totality, but that is what it came to cure. That we are in little pockets able to have elements of self-determination. We cannot all be in the national government. You cannot have 50 million cabinet secretaries. So with devolution, at least that kind of cures it. But ultimately, we must have a shift in mindset. We must have a shift in politics, in the political culture of this country, in a way that everyone is considered. Everyone comes to the fore. Everyone. You remember there was a conversation around CD. I think it was CDF. The determination of who gets what. Is it landmass? Is it people? Mm-hmm. And the authority or the body responsible for that was saying allocation is mostly by virtue of land, and that is because every inch of this country must feel like Kenya. Okay, so ultimately, like you're saying, how do we move forward? That's exactly how we move forward.
Well, okay, even as you wrap up, Dismus has talked about a very critical thing, drawing from Martin Luther King, that we shall not be judged by the color of our skin, race, creed, but the content of our character. Do we have in this cabinet people who have content of character to take us to that bright space where it won't matter where they come from, they'll serve Kenyans diligently?
You mentioned last time on subject matter
Experts.
expertise on any particular field. The content of the character is that you see the vetting process was a conveyor belt. Just pushing you to the next level. Except Stella, who I had an opportunity to work with, not make it. Is that I don't think so. We are yet to go. We have a long way to go to be able to have expertise, to be able to deliver for this country. Because what we saw in the cabinet appointment is that it is political appointment. It is political pacification, to use what my learned colleague has said, is that we want to massage an ego of one particular class of polity, class of particular electorate, pacify them. The agencies are not even in this cabinet. So I don't think we are still far from merit, we are still far from meritocracy to say, we are still far from the content of the character. But you see that the nature of our politics is that it has sort of lulled things, it has sort of pacified the nation. People are now cool, people are not fighting anymore, people are not in the streets. But then you question like now, is the problem the political class or the Kenyans? Because you see now we have to fight with. Is it us or is it the now political class? Another thing that Gen Z brought us, very critical in this conversation, is public participation. You know, public participation is something that people have been taking for granted for a long time. It has been a very mechanical process that people don't show up, or people remember the first case that we had in public participation in Kiambu County. The guys met at Windsor Hotel. So you realize, and this is the case that Justice Udunga said, I mean, there must be a meaningful public participation. And that's what James has put. And even in this cabinet, meaningful public participation. And a very critical issue that maybe you may take it up on the cabinet is that you see the government of Kenya, the Republic of Kenya, through the Attorney General, have been losing so many cases in court on account of lack of public participation. The Finance Act 2013, part of the laws, was struck out, especially on the housing levy, because of lack of participation, but it was secured or it was rescued by an amendment or by a bill. The Public Finance Act 2013, the Court of Appeal struck it down at the heels of whereby the president refused to assent Public Finance Act 2020. And then the Court of Appeal has struck down Finance Act 2023. So this government has no finance bill that has been enacted under President William. Right? For lack of proper public participation is the key. So you wonder now, who is advising the president? People who are saying the president advises himself, or he listens to himself more than he listens to his advisors, or the advisors fear him. So we don't have a finance bill that is standing as we're taking now. That is now bringing the government, the only finance bill a finance act that is standing in 2022, which was Uhuru's finance bill that we're using to raise revenue. We have a financial, fiscal, and budgetary crisis in this country that has never been seen before. Because of lack of public participation. So you wonder.
Chelanga,
and then now finally, it's the TISA. It's called the Institute of Social Accountability.
Yeah.
They have filed a case in court to challenge the Appropriation Act 2024, which the president signed the other day.
Yeah,
and it is very likely that it will be struck down. If I read that thing very keenly. So the government is losing. We are not appropriating. And we are getting into a crisis because of lack of public
I know Dismus wants to respond to that. Okay. And I think, Dismus, it is important that you respond to that even as we take the conversation to this very interesting. Yes.
When it comes to matters public participation.
Yeah, you see now when you talk about public participation, the lawyers go lyrical, they say that there must be public participation. But this public participation has not been defined. Like, for instance, Wakil Gachui says that, the finance bill was discussed at Windsor, so there was no structured public participation. But is it very clear that who from the public is actually supposed to participate? Because when you're talking about the finance bill, it's very technical. It's a technical kind of conversation. So can we assume that all the 50 million Kenyans have got capacity and competence to add value to the Finance Act? So I don't know whether there is merit or demerit. But he made a sweeping statement which cannot go unchallenged, that the vetting of cabinet secretaries has become a conveyor belt. Let's look at some of the nominees. The nominee for the Attorney General, Dorcas Agaka. The way she presented herself, the way she presented issues, it left no doubt in anybody's mind that she's got capacity and competence. And it's because of that vetting process that Kenyans saw that there is a top legal brain who is suited for these dockets. And all conversations pointed in that direction, that this is a very solid lady. And when she gets sworn in as the AG, she'll become the first female. However, there is other nominee for East African community. A basic question that, what is your understanding of international trade or regional trade? And then she said, where I come from, we trade with people from Uganda and South Sudan. So I actually understand international trade. Then there was another nominee who did not know the members of the committee. She doesn't know the committee composition. Others do not know, not even the name of the committee. So if you say
that was a member of the committee, you remember?
Yeah. So if you say that it is just merely a conveyor belt, you'd be making a blanket statement, because others demonstrated their capacity, and people went back home knowing that if you're talking about the nominee for AG, very solid. But the other one for East African community and ASAL areas.
And I think it's the reason why Wakili is saying it's a conveyor belt. Because you see excellence and you see not so excellent candidates going. So you're wondering, so where was the sieving taking place? And it's not clear.
Well, the one for gender was told to take a walk.
I know. And even the one for gender, the reason why people have a problem with the one for gender being told, you take a walk, is very simple. When you ask someone questions on the subject of their docket, yet the president has the prerogative of changing these people 3 weeks down the lane. Yes, and you move from a docket that you demonstrated understanding to another docket without vetting. Conveyor belt per excellence. The reasons why one was rejected and then the others were accepted is not clear. You just see, the rest were told you go, and then we have to do something to tell Kenyans that at least there is vetting. But Wakili, I know you want to talk about...
before that, before my learned colleague says something, in the committee, the committee on appointments, they made a recommendation in one of the paragraphs and said the president may consider reallocating these cabinet secretaries to a docket of their competence.
Wakili, on public, was it on public? Yes.
And I think for a very long time we've not taken public participation seriously in this country. What we did see with young Kenyans, I don't want to say Gen Zs because millennials.
We were there, man. We were there. No, we were there.
We also heavily contributed to the struggle.
Yes.
So,
and you need accolades. You deserve accolades. You deserve flowers.
We never really took public participation seriously for a very long time. And when I got into the political space in 2020, it's one of the things I starkly realized about young Kenyans. The apathy to decision making, participating, not just like sitting down and looking at bills, looking at policy formulation, but also generally governance and politics in this country. A lot of them bore a lot of apathy towards politics and decision making generally. They did not want to vote. They did not want to be members of a political party. I was trying to recruit them. Why should I be a member of a political party? Talking about philosophies and standing by the philosophy or ideology of a party that you believe in and just stand by it. It's one of the things I also tried to encourage a lot of young people in talking about public participation, but they did not take it seriously until they had to go through that the finance bill. And while you say that 90% of the bill was quite all right, remember this is a group that economically is still struggling to find its footing generally. And everything felt punitive.
Mm-hmm.
Everything felt punitive. So that's when they started doing the phone calls, kusalimia wabunge. And the question now becomes, what is the threshold of public participation in this country? How do we go about it then? I remember a lot of people submitted memoranda, the vetting of nominees to the cabinet. Did we ever see, were they publicized? Do we have a record of that? How do we know then it's not a conveyor belt, but in fact...
There's actually a record in the Hansard.
Oh, that people can actually... You can actually
Yeah, you
go
can
to the
make
website.
reference, yeah.
Oh wow, I did.
All you need to do is to establish contact with the clerk of the National Assembly or Senate.
You cannot download it. You cannot.
You can download.
Okay.
The National Assembly, rather
The
the Parliament is
Fireside should be having that.
It's very complicated.
No, it's not complicated because you see everything that is done by the National Assembly and Senate is in the interest of Kenyans, and there is not a session that they hold in camera. They go there to represent our interests, and especially on these critical issues like the finance bill, everything is done in full glare of the media. And all the information is public. It's only that a majority of Kenyans have got a phobia for reading, so they don't go and fish.
Yes. That's true. That's actually quite true, because now what I'm finding myself doing a lot when I'm in my civic engagements, is reminding young people that every state office in this country has a website, and then at that website you will find the Act of Parliament that establishes that office. You will find strategic plans. You will find whatever development undertakings they're having, projects, everything. You will always find everything on on their websites. And remember, this is a country that has one of the best
Internet penetration,
but establishment of the access to information liberties. So what we have been seeing since the finance bill fiasco is a lot of young people are now taking public participation very, very seriously, and that has in turn ensured that Parliament equally takes this thing very, very seriously. The other day I was laughing on social media. I can't remember which bill this was, but Kimani Ichung'wah had a bill withdrawn.
The livestock bill.
Yes, I think it was a livestock bill, because a lot of Kenyans, there was a lot of uproar across the country. People had submitted their views online, offline, on their dissatisfaction on how that bill was drafted. Right now, as we speak, there is another one, the Provision of Sanitary Towels Bill. It is another one. It's another bill that is quite unpopular with a lot of Kenyans. I am privy to certain information that a lot of the opinions young Kenyans and especially women have put across are against that particular bill. I'm looking forward to seeing how the clerk of the Senate handles that situation, because it's very, very sensitive, and I know that is one of the other bills that could actually have Kenyans going back to the streets. So
let me just buttress your point. When you talk about this public participation, Professor. And in the context of, say, the finance bill, there are people who say that the finance bill received 1,000 documents. So again, one sits back and poses the question, are we looking at the quality of the documents, or we are looking at the quantity of documents submitted? There's a very high chance you can submit, and I know you're a researcher, you can submit 1 million documents that do not move the needle at all, and you can send one document which is very heavy.
Holds water,
So I think this thing of public participation, it needs to be demystified. That if you present 1,000 documents, the committee must not take the views in the 1,000 documents. The committee is looking for quality, not necessarily quantity. And this reminds one of during the presidential petition at the Supreme Court. You saw parties coming with documents in trucks, in wheelbarrows, in tanks. But eventually, when you look at everything else, when it's distilled, it's a one-page document, A4, double spacing. So we need to be very careful whether we are just going for quality or we are going for quantity.
But I mean, the on that thing, because very sensitive, is that you may risk getting into a point whereby you think the animals farm, as you say, the animals, others are
Professor, give me a book.
more equal than the others. As the Siderata would say, even the weak has a point. So we have to listen to everyone. And I think we must have a legislative and a policy framework on public participation, so that I think it's only Makueni County under Professor Kivutha Kibwana, when he was the governor, they had a proper public participation act on how they go, how they say now. We had to have a mango bill because of mangoes in Makueni. So you see, they have a structure on how to do. So we need to have a structured public participation thing, such that everyone's voice is heard. I mean, Parliament is well resourced. I mean, they can employ everyone to sieve through all those documents. Say, by the way, this point has been met, this point has been met, what do you consider? At the end of the day, they're the one who will make the ultimate decisions to see whether it is popular or not, or the merit of any public participation or an input. But everyone has to be heard. But I think that's a conversation we need to carry forward, because it's becoming a thorn in the flesh of our public discourse.
Maybe because Dismus has a lot of information about reaching the clerk of the National Assembly and getting those documents. Maybe we should have, someone from the National Assembly just speak to us around that.
Exactly.
Anyway, good comments coming from our viewers from all over the world, from the diaspora. One here is saying that the phone call sums up the political class looking after each other. Because when we open everyone's guns, then all the worms will fly out like a fountain. Now, we have comments from almost all over the world. There are Kenyans in the diaspora. And I know you're very passionate about exporting top talent. You talked about us exporting Raila Odinga to AUC. But I think this regime has been very consistent. The president has worked so hard to secure deals with other countries, to see Kenyans go to other countries, secure employment. The Gen Zs were making a lot of noise that there's no way you want us to go and be house helps in other countries, and your family, is enjoying, the package of, good jobs and good life here in this country. There are also people who are critical of the fact that when you have, your top talent exported to other countries, you're essentially going to manufacture there, to import here, in which case you're building other economies. But I think this is an area where you should be considered a subject matter expert. Is it possible to just, a subject matter expert, is it possible to just unpack to us, what exactly does that mean within the context of globalization? We talk about, globalizing the local and localizing the global.
Yeah, without using those terminologies, when you're talking about globalization, it falls into two aspects. There's a globalization of markets, that the entire world is one market. That is why people like the iPhone manufacturer, when they manufacture a phone, it's not meant for the US market. It's meant for the global market. And then also production, that people look for the low-income localities to do their production. The same thing applies to talent. That if you've been trained by the Kenyan education system, you're actually considered a top talent, so you can work anywhere in the world. And in my view, there's nothing wrong in the Kenya Kwanza administration. I'm not going to use the word exporting because it appears like it's a product instead of a service. There's nothing wrong in the Kenya Kwanza administration creating opportunities for talent in Kenya and out of Kenya. It's because of the concept of demand and supply. You cannot have, say in a year our universities produce, say, 10,000 teachers. If the Kenya can only absorb 5,000, you're not going to tell the other 5,000 teachers to go by the beach and wait for mangoes to fall, for the entire day. If there's an opportunity outside Kenya, let's do it. And we're given a million examples. Look at a country like India. They came up with a deliberate policy of producing top ICT talent and exporting it all over the world. Right now, the US ICT and financial systems and infrastructure is run by Indians. It's a deliberate policy. When you go to the Philippines, they came up with a policy that they're going to export manual labor. And it's a deliberate policy. So, in my view, it would be on the extreme. If somebody says that the administration is exporting watu wa Mkono or Juluedo or Kandeamoko to go and work in these other countries. No, it's creating opportunities for Kenyans. In my view, the administration has to create opportunities either in Kenya or outside Kenya. Because according to central bank figures, they remit an equivalent of 4.3 billion per annum. That is top dollar. And a good example still, when you go to India, you recall at some stage, the World Bank president was Indian, the British Prime Minister was Indian, and the Indian Prime Minister obviously was Indian. Now, when these people meet at a G7 meeting, can you begin to, paint a picture of the kind of conversations? At some stage, the US president was a Kenyan American, Barack Obama. So can you imagine if you had a Kenyan American as the president of the US,
Dismus,
and then you've got a Kenyan as a prime minister in the UK, and in maybe New Zealand and Australia. Let's export these talents. The only thing the government needs to be sure is that when these people go there, they're not mistreated. That the Kenya government has got their back. Because like the US says, wherever there's an American citizen, we've got your back. and also to ensure that Kenyans understand the local culture. Because understand, part of the challenge that Kenyans face in the Middle East, they don't understand the local system, the local culture. So they go there with the Kenyan expectation, and then of course, they make mistakes. And then there's part of Kenya that is extremely rude and arrogant. Like typically, when a Kenyan goes to a bar, they do not request for a drink. They just say, "Madam, let's ask her."
They order.
Yeah, they order. But if you go to a neighboring country,
They should.
yeah, no, but if you go to Tanzania and you say, "Madam, let's have nyamachoma or a beer," nobody is going to serve you. So, in my view, the government has got this unique responsibility to prepare Kenyans for the international market. Look at those opportunities and prepare. And for the people who are saying that we're exporting this manual labor and they're going to be mistreated, they're being selfish. Majority of the guys who are complaining about they've got jobs in Kenya.
Yes, I think maybe the people who are saying that they're going to be mistreated may be simplistic in the way they are looking at it. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have a job in Kenya and there's an opportunity, you would go. If you get that opportunity, and if the government has organized for that opportunity, it's just a win-win for you and the government. The critical question is, if the government can sit down and have conversations with other countries that are in need of labor, probably cheap labor, I think the same government can talk to these countries and have whatever our people are going to do in those countries done in this country. Especially if you look at it in terms of, whatever is the challenges that the world is facing today, the challenges of global warming and all that. It is the heavy manufacturers in the global north that are actually responsible for the warming of the earth. Now, the cost of even producing that iPhone in China is extremely high and quite detrimental to the environment, that you would expect that the negotiation would leverage on the availability of cheap labor here relative to what is in the global north, that would provide the same iPhone, but give Kenyans more opportunities within Kenya and contribute much more to our economy. So I think if that conversation is raised to a point of what is the other side of not going, if we are at the table negotiating, and does it mean that we can't negotiate to bring these opportunities, set up these manufacturing firms here in Kenya? But let me not come back to you, because I can see the two Achilles here, are also waiting for, their take on this.
Okay, I mean, I'm not a subject matter expert as this.
That's what the condition.
But you see, I've had this conversation in the public domain. Like, why can we create jobs here? Why do we want to export? But of course, Kenya have had a very good education system, and we have always been top talent exporters. As Dismus has said, we've had the first Luo president.
You say Kenya and America. I want to be part of that.
You want to be associated with it.
I'm using that word deliberately because
There's a little there.
I'm using the word deliberately. It started at Tom Mboya during the airlift, empowering Kenyans, taking them to the United States to be able to, and they've come out and they've performed top in the world. And also in athletics, you see, most of our athletes are doing very well outside the country. But another thing that I would say is that people we ignore most is that we always focus on markets and the government. But people pay less concern, pay less regard to the communities, for example. And he talked about something that people ignore most, that the president has been pushing on climate change. You see, the global north has been polluting the entire earth. Yeah? And then now they're giving us
reckless abandon.
With reckless abandon. They're giving us a very punitive regulations on carbon trading. And you find that communities in Africa, and in Kenya more particularly, are the ones who conserve the environment. They conserve the forest, they conserve the wildlife, they conserve and all those kind of things. So that if you could focus even on the community-based employment is also one of the things that people are. And I would want to see that if there is a proactive government policy to be able to empower communities. If you go, for example, in a place called Bush Forest, or you go to Abadeas, whereby the community there, they are not deforesting, they are protecting the environment. The only thing they do is that their livestock are grazing there, they get the dead wood to go and use as firewood. Those are people who are protecting the globe, not just Kenya, and they should be able to empower. That's why the president, when negotiating with the Western powers, is that we should be able to get a fair deal as a communities, as a country,
Carbon
but
credits.
focused on the communities so that the communities can get employment, they can get compensation, because you don't need to go to Saudi Arabia to become a maid to make money. You can stay at home, conserve the environment, take care of the wildlife, take care of, and you can be able to make money. And it comes to the point that Professor is saying is, it is not sustainable that we are exporting them. Yes, there are some people, they give us remittances. But why can we even remit? We should be able to be in Kenya, to be able to support our children in the United States or in the United Kingdom or in China or in Japan or in Europe, that they are studying there or they are working there. We should be able to produce in Kenya to be able to support other Kenyans outside the country. We should not be just depending on the remittances that they come to our country. We should also to remit back to help those
Musa, you may
countries.
be aware of something called economic diplomacy, where President Ruto wants to position Kenya in 3 regards. Number one, as a natural FDI destination, foreign direct investment, creating that environment you are talking about. And that's what Professor was alluding to. That will make Kenya the manufacturing zone or manufacturing preference. But you know, it's not overnight. It's not this instant cup of coffee that I'm having. It's a long-term thing. The second one is creating opportunities for our exports, catalyzing our exports, you know, like tea, coffee, and everything else, creating markets. And that's why the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, Labor, and the National Treasury have been signing, every single day there's a bilateral they're signing. You've seen so many presidents coming to Kenya, signing those bilaterals. That is a part of the process. And the talent you're talking about, one would be very selfish. If, for instance, Wakilia gets invited to go and teach at Harvard, then she says, I can't go to Harvard simply because I want to be in Kenya. It means that we cannot conquer the world. People say that the world has become a global village, that it's become flat. In my view, wherever there's an opportunity for a Kenyan to go and shine. I was in St. Mary's School here, they say, shine in everything, everywhere. So if there's an opportunity for Kenyans to go and shine at the UN, let them go in truckloads. If the European Union needs a Kenyan to go and seasonal jobs maybe for 6 months, go and do it and you come back with the skills. You cannot tell a Kenyan who is sleeping on an empty stomach, who yawns for 24 hours a day, that while there's a job in Uganda or Tanzania, stay put till we sort out the economic turbulence and then you'll get a job. There's a gentleman called Adam Smith who says rational human beings, and one assumes that Kenyans are rational human beings, they'll always pursue their selfish interest. Yeah, so in my view, if there's an opportunity in Kenya, take advantage of it. If there's an opportunity in Italy, wherever it is, take advantage of it.
I think the point we agree with Dismus. If there is any opportunity anywhere, shine with it.
I think if the goal is the world is ours for the taking, then Kenyans go out there and shine. Okay, but Kenya ultimately must work for Kenyans. Yeah. Simple.
Kenya can work for Kenyans.
Let me finish.
Let's work for Kenyans outside Kenya.
Let me finish. Kenya must work for Kenyans. Not everyone is interested in leaving this country. Not everyone is interested in starting a family, setting up home elsewhere. Not everyone is interested in that. And it is okay for a Kenyan to choose their country. Our birthright is our birthright, and it is what it is. Our government has time and again failed from this regime going all the way backwards in supporting manufacturing, the manufacturing sector in this country. We have failed in providing proper environments or conducive environments for foreign investors. You are talking about foreign investors setting up shop here and ensuring talent remains here. Talent grows from here. And even, you never know, the innovation that comes from that, more Kenyans will have their own, they'll come up with their own ideas, come up with their own companies, come up with their own manufacturing industries and whatnot. But ultimately, the government has failed to that extent. Now, when you talk about it is unfair to talk to discourage a Kenyan from going to take up manual labors, do you know, and by this one I blame on Uhuru's regime, you know that at some point, I think in 2022, Kenyans were coming, every week, JKIA would bring in 10 bodies from the Middle East, 10 young bodies from the Middle East. Killed, and mostly young women. So it's not even a cultural issue. It's an issue of the foreign, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs failing, and the state generally, in protecting Kenyans who go out there. And even as you look for, opportunities and for talent, opportunities for our talent out there, it is important to realize that manual labor is not talent, number one. Number two, that is a form of modern slavery.
Yeah.
And more often than not, the people who take up these, opportunities in manual labor are people who come from very poor backgrounds that do not have influence. Right now, as we speak, and you can even try this tomorrow, along Koinange Street, I don't know which building this is, but on the far end, Ukielekea University Way, you'll always find very young girls, I think from Tana River County mostly, walking in hoods. And these are obviously young girls who are being, I don't want to use the word trafficked or smuggled, but generally they're being swept into the Middle East to take up roles as house helps, cleaners, whatnot. But these are roles that they cannot even speak up. These are roles that are not protected. Remember that for a lot of the countries in the Middle East, a casual laborer is considered property. You're the property of whoever owns you, whoever owns the company, whoever owns the home. So that is how the dynamics of labor laws there are. Ultimately, Kenyans who take up these jobs are not protected. Even the state might not even have. There's somebody right now, I think, who is supposed to is on death row in Saudi Arabia.
I mean, yeah.
In Qatar,
and
which country?
No,
Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Saudi Arabia.
And the arrangement is
There is
very
even
bizarre.
a campaign to raise
funds.
Yeah,
Yes,
for him.
No, actually, to buttress
let
your
me
point.
finish. Let me just finish. So to that end, I disagree with you that we're looking for opportunities for manual labor. No, let's make opportunities here. We have wonderful laws, labor laws. We have fantastic opportunities. It's just by design that our government is simply not supporting manufacturing, science, technology, and innovation.
Okay, Asa, before you do that, is that there's a very critical thing that my learned colleague has raised, is about the proactivity of the State Department of Foreign and Diaspora Affairs in terms of securing our citizens outside this country who are working. Many other times, as you say, in the previous regime, you would find Kenyans are being convicted in Ethiopia, they are being like the one now in Saudi Arabia, and people are being mistreated. There was no, but I mean, I would give credit to the current administration. Is the Minister of Diaspora Affairs, led
State Department for Diaspora Affairs.
State Department of Diaspora Affairs, particularly the PS, Rosalind Jogo, has been very proactive in terms of trying to figure out where Kenyans are. If there is, like, for example, in the raids in the UK, the stabbing, they figure out where our Kenyans are. And I think that is the sense of patriotism, that also as a government, that we should be able to trace our citizens wherever they are, whatever things they are doing outside this country, whether you're a professional, whether you are doing what he calls the manual laboring, or when you are a professor, we should be able to trace and find out how our Kenyans are faring. Like the most recent one was the KQ, Democratic Republic of Congo, where they are the country manager, and for some reason that some cargo was not properly handled. So I think going forward also is that the Ministry of the Department of Diaspora Affairs need to be strengthened and properly financed to be able to support Kenyans who are outside this country, because they are also our citizens and they are working for gain and they are supporting our economy. And while at the same time, I support my colleague, we also need to create jobs. Yeah.
I know for a fact that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has created those safeguards and protection systems for Kenyans, especially under the Kenya Kwanza administration. But it's also incumbent on any Kenyan that when you're looking for an opportunity in Saudi Arabia or in Italy, the moment you land in that country, register your presence with our mission. Majority of a number of the people who sadly get encumbered by other liabilities, they do not register their presence. So the head of a mission has no idea that there is a Kenya around here. It's only when they get into trouble that they start looking for the embassy. And at that time, the embassy is not aware. Like the calls by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there are all the Kenyans in Lebanon, can you register with our mission? Or in the UK, can you register with our mission? We shouldn't be having that call, because it's expected that if you are a law-abiding citizen, you're going to look for opportunities in any country.
But also, my colleague mentioned something. I think she's well versed about that on human trafficking and international law in that space. We have employment agencies in Kenya. That has been a big scandal in this country.
Yeah.
It has happened in Eldoret where
Is it the home of champions or the home of scandals?
it's a home of scandals over there. We had Finland scholarship program, but also we had employment. There are employment agencies, the department, whereby Owilla has an employment agency, and they end up calling Kenyan people opportunities elsewhere, or even if they get there, they get a road deal, and that is also something that we need to cancel on that side, because you see there are so many Kenyans who have suffered under the hands of employment agencies which are not regulated properly, and they are just scot-free. They are walking in town. They have taken hundreds of thousands of people's money. Or if the guys are there, they don't have a job, or if they have a job, it is very dehumanizing.
Actually, I understand, before she comes in, I understand some of those agencies, they actually step on the Kenyan constitution that when you land in that specific country, they will take away your passport.
Exactly.
So you can't move.
I think this must, for purposes of taking this conversation forward, you are highly placed to get figures here, so that in our next conversation around this, we get to understand what is the State Department doing, what numbers do we have there, what does the remittances look like, and probably does it allay the fear that most Kenyans have that the exodus to these countries, especially in the Middle East, is occasioned by the socio and economic challenges that people have, and symptomatic of a failed system to provide for the people in this country a way of creating wealth for themselves. But before we leave, lady and gentlemen, the elephant in the room is President Ruto's second cabinet. A dream team, so to speak, that is supposed to deal with the grievances that were raised by the Gen Zs. What are some of the deliverables that we are seeing? One of the key things that people have been talking about is the key ministries that have been given to top talent from yes. And my professor, Dr. Wandia, would be mad at me if I talk about talent. She says that there's nothing like talent, it's work. You cannot produce anything with talent. You must work. Looking at treasury, looking at energy, looking at the blue economy and mining, and of course all the other ministries, including the one that your friend who didn't see the clearer picture of how the government has delivered, but now that he's inside, the delivery is out of this world. What are we looking at? If we start with treasury, for instance, treasury and Oparanya's ministry that is supposed to look at the Hustler Fund. There are a lot of challenges there, and there are people who are saying that these are people who probably are set up, that when things fail, will say that we gave ODM treasury. Now look, the cost of living is still going high. We still have to tax people. And we know that there's no way a government can fund its operations unless it gets resources. And then there's this problem where we are collecting 10 shillings and 7 shillings goes into paying debt. So from here, what have you seen coming out of these cabinet secretaries? Let me start with Wakili.
The two Wakilis.
Wakili from Ustawi-Ke, the voice of the Gen Z. Are you seeing hope? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel?
I don't even think it's a matter of hope. It's a matter of you will either perform ama utasalimiwa.
I like that.
So there are two options.
So there's the option of they are delivering for us, or we have an opportunity of draining the swamp.
Exactly, simple.
Okay.
So, for a start, yes. There's probably hope. And if I was any of those CSs, and I am frustrated because I was listening to Moses Kuria speak the other day on Citizen, and I think Professor Njuguna as well.
Yeah.
And they were talking about there was a lot of frustration within their ministries, a lot of sabotage, there's a lot of this and that. If I was any of the CSs right now, given the climate, given the vigilance, and even the temperatures with young Kenyans in this country, the moment I realize that there is an element of sabotage in how I am working, I will jump ship. Simple. If you know you're not able to do your job, please resign. Just resign. Let this be somebody else's burden. But that said, the burden ultimately falls on William Ruto.
Yeah.
And I am hoping that moving forward, he's able to allow these people to do what they're supposed to do. If they're there on merit, they're able to perform their duties, they're able to deliver to us Kenyans. And maybe, I don't know, maybe by 2027, things would have come down a bit for him.
The person I sympathize with is Mbadi, because, it's the eye of the storm in the cabinet. Because he's taking over a docket whereby there is no finance bill that will have revenue-raising measures to be able to finance the budget. The Appropriation Act is under challenge in court. The Finance Act 2023 has been declared null and void. He has a huge debt book. He has, there is a budget deficit of about 300 billion shillings plus. So I think one of my good friends called Mohammed Wali said that the problem we have in Kenya is not a revenue problem. It's an expenditure problem. It's that we collect enough money to be able to sustain our budget. But the problem is there's a lot of wastage. There is a lot of unnecessary expenditure. There's a lot of, why wouldn't a minister drive a Passat like Kibaki's regime? Why would they need a V8 and a chase car and so many other coteries of state largesse? So I would believe that if Mbadi would carry it well to deal with an expenditure problem, to be able to cut all that particular expenditure. I saw judiciary the other day saying that they're not recruiting judges because there is a budget cut. But you see, they should reduce the expenditure of going to Naivasha every weekend for a retreat when they can do it online. I just need bundles. So I think Mbadi has a huge responsibility. I saw Oparanya saying the other day, which is also a political issue, he saying that I'm going to help this government. If they do not need my help, then I will exit the state. That is also a political issue that is coming in. But is this cabinet going to last? Is it going to last? That is my question.
Yes, Dismus, before you come in, yes. What Wakili is saying probably needs to be situated within a broader context. Mbadi is an accountant, and I want to believe that he'll go for those specials immediately. Yes. What accountants see is cut cost.
Yes.
And economists will tell you, even if you cut cost and cut, there's a ripple negative effect.
Yes.
Unless you have a sustainable way of ensuring that you're still generating wealth. So the first key thing that confronts Mbadi, of course, is the issue of expenditure. The second key thing is, how do you collect enough to ensure that the 70% that goes into paying debt still leaves you with a large enough 30% that can support the recurrent expenditure by the government and also provide resources for creating a further enabling environment to generate more resources. And then you look at what Mbadi is confronted with, the education sector. And the CS for education is from your village. Talked about...
I'm from Nairobi.
Yes, talked about the problems in education. 1,001 problems that require funding.
Pension.
Then the president, in his address to this new cabinet, talked about corruption and having a zero-based budget.
Yes.
And regulating the VAT to ensure that we collect enough. If you look at all this from where you see it being an accountant and a political risk analyst, where does this take the country, and is Mbadi cut out to deliver?
Yeah, in the interest of full disclosure, Mbadi did CPA, which is a Kenyan examination. Well, I did ACCA, which is a UK accounting qualification. But obviously, that's neither here nor there. In my view, what really Mbadi needs to do, and I begin from what you said, the president told the cabinet, that their priority must be Kenya. Now, we are told that up to a third of our budget goes to corruption.
Yeah.
So
budgeted corruption.
Yeah, budgeted corruption. People are given khaki envelopes at the abolition facilities at the National Assembly, and then they budget for corruption. Hence the reason why we need that zero-based budgeting. That at the beginning of every financial year, the accounting officer has to come with a budget from zero. So you start from zero, and then you build it upwards. That is the only way to kill corruption. Because the obtaining situation is that if your budget is 1 billion, you will say next year give me 1.5 billion, that year give me 2 billion, when you actually don't account for how you're spending this money. So if we embrace that zero-based budgeting, then probability of suffocating corruption is extremely high. Because now everything has to be budgeted from scratch. Then number two, you recall that the Honorable Mbadi said that if the president wants skunks, let's give him skunks to work with. So during his vetting, a question was posed: do you consider yourself a skunk? Then he said he doesn't have an opinion. And ODM has indicated that they've released their top talents. Top talents. The people who have joined the cabinet from ODM are the sharpest tool in the shed from ODM. And I know some members in this panel are ODM members. But having gone to the National Treasury, Mr. Mbadi is confronted by facts that are new, but because of misinformation and disinformation and loyalty to the party leader, he chose to ignore. That having a conversation with the Bretton Woods institution is an indispensable proposition. You must talk to them. And that was one of his facts acts at the National Treasury, that you have to have a conversation with those two important organizations because of the elephant in the room, which is public debt. And public debt was created by none other than President Kenyatta. He was on a borrowing spree. And when he was about to leave office, he said, let somebody else take care of the skunk. So that is something he needs to address. And then, of course, now these other issues are raised by everybody today. Every union is declaring industrial action. Anybody with a union. And that ball goes to Mbadi. Now, Mbadi has got to translate his eloquence at the National Assembly and his theory and pontification. And as the topmost talent from ODM, we expect that this is going to be a walk in the park. Because he has said, give me this job for a day. He's been given this job for more than a day, so we expect results. And then also for Opio and I, who say, wait a minute, the cost of doing business in Kenya is very high, inter alia, because of the cost of energy. Now, he's been given that docket. And if you're looking for politics of deceit, this weekend, he went to the village. And
he's on homecoming.
Yeah, homecoming. And when we are talking about the opulence, it was a fleet of top-of-the-range vehicles stretching for miles on end with that flag. I'm hoping he went to tell his villagers that you're not going to see me for the next 3 years. I'll be working at reducing the cost of energy in Kenya. Because Kenya cannot be an attractive FDI destination, or we can't even promote our local manufacturing if the cost of energy is very high. In my view, the people who've been given these responsibilities, it's going to expose their deceit. Because they said that President Ruto has not gotten the sharpest tools in the shed to run these dockets. Now they've been given the opportunity, and Mura is waiting. But going back to Professor Njuguna Njoroge, who was running that docket, highly regarded, understand a PhD in economics. Yeah, and in my view, Professor Njuguna takes responsibility for the Gen Z demonstrations because he did not bother to communicate about the import of Gen Z. He just came up with all the proposals and he took a back seat, having a cup of coffee. Then he left the MP in charge of the chairman of that parliamentary committee, who was very arrogant and, telling people that if you can't afford motor vehicle circulation tax, just park your jalopy under the shade and, use public transport. Yet public transport is not even a viable option. So in my view, this is the opportunity for these guys to demonstrate that they've got capacity and competence. I can bet my grandfather's cow that if these people do not deliver, this will mark the successful end of ODM. Because Kenyans would say, if this is your top talent, and they've been given critical ministries, you indicated last time that the National Treasury is the only ministry anchored in law mentioned in those National Treasury. If your top talent cannot turn around the economy, then what are we talking about?
I think that's a very good place to find ourselves in as Kenyans. We are in this situation where there are individuals who've thrown themselves into the deep end and they've told us we can swim. If they don't get to the shore, we'll be very happy. If they get to the shore, we'll be delivered. Anyway, because look at it this way. Yeah, look at it this way. These are people who've decided that we are going to put our necks on the chopping board.
Literally.
Meaning they believe they have what it takes. And they've had this president who has been magnanimous enough, extended an olive branch. brought them into the cabinet. And from where I see it, I think it's something that is fairly refreshing in our democracy for the simple reason that, one, the president brought himself very low in terms of accountability and even interacted with young people on X. And I mean, that means that the bodies of this world, Pio and I, or any other cabinet secretary will not say no to Kenyans who would want to question things on any other space, including parliament. And for me, that is a very important thing for Kenyans, that the president brought these guys to a level where we can question them. And what they've said in the past and what they're going to do will be brought to the fore, and people will be asking questions. Now, the fundamental question that I want to ask, which we can wrap this conversation on, is, the president has been going around distributing electricity, promising a lot of things. And you look at it in the grand scale of things, I mean, it's good if a family somewhere in Suna East, where I come from, has access to electricity and, they have light at the end of the day. But when you talk about transforming the economy of this country, is that what we are looking at? When you're looking at Joe's ministry, when you're looking at Opio and I and energy, are we looking at that power that is distributed to villages, or are we talking about power that would power the manufacturing sector, power that would reduce the cost of doing business in this country low? And then if you look at even the other ministries, have they given us a blueprint of what the president spelled out?
But I think we've been focusing much on
Okili, before you answer that question,
I'm not even answering
I want to load it further. Earlier on, you spoke about the judiciary. We've got an act which the president refused to sign, another one which was declared null, void, and unconstitutional. And what are these other NGO you said? I'm not sure whether they're beneficiaries of further resources that they've also gone to courts. The question that a rational Kenyan would want to ask the two lawyers is that actually a landmine for this administration? That every single piece of legislation, either because of, you said public participation, then others have just been said they're not fit for purpose. What does that portend for the administration?
I think before you go there, we know we've been focusing about the five, but also, Ruto has retained substantial part of.
Yes.
And we also need to say that we should not focus on the F6. There are another 18 guys, 16, who also we need to have. Okay, I mean, because of bias, I think Kipchumba sports.
You declared your interest.
I've declared my interest because he's my very good friend. And I think sport is something that we have really neglected in this country. It is, a proud moment to see a Kenyan flag being hoisted internationally.
And the national anthem.
And the national anthem being sung. And I think that is an opportunity for us also to commercialize sports and because we cannot manufacture enough, but we can manufacture enough athletes, especially from Elgeyo Marakwet. Anyway, for the legislation, what my good friend would be is that there have been a lot of arrogance in the sense that they want to force things. The former Attorney General Emeritus, J.B. Muturi,
who is now cabinet
secretary in charge of manpower, said he has not been consulted in so many other things that led to declaration of government actions administratively.
Did he actually say that?
He said that he's not been consulted. He said that. Yeah, before he resigned. Before he was asked to resign.
You remember he blamed the media for...
Yeah, he said he resigned. Actually, I mean, there was an issue of odd legality. When Kibaki says that I have accepted your resignation, even without you resigning.
Without your knowledge.
It's like the Pope telling the cardinals that your resignation has been accepted.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there must be a problem in the government in the sense that they need to put the act together. The judiciary also, they're acting the judiciary in the sense that the judiciary is our last bastion of in most Kenyans. The budget is being cut, they're being twisted, railroaded into certain directions to make decisions in a way, being subject to public ridicule. So now you find a judiciary, when you can push a cat to the wall, they will also defend themselves. You see, remember during BBI, the BBI guy said that we're going to have a judicial ombudsman, which is appointed by the president. And the judiciary had to say no. And now you're telling judiciary we are cutting your budget. And then some people have brought a case before them to say that your actions, your Appropriation Act, is illegal.
But you know, the acts are consequences of their own action. By declaring all these things unconstitutional, illegal, and unconstitutional.
Because there is a budget system, a budget, what's called budgetary and fiscal problem that we have in this country is that you see the president, like in the U.S., apart from the Attorney General, you should have in the U.S. we have something called the White House Council. We must have a council in this, not necessarily consulting with the Attorney General, but they work together in unison to be able, you may have a second check and see, have a judicial opinion, play the devil's advocate to say, what is the worst case scenario? What can Katiba Institute do? What can Dismus say? What can Mutata say about this?
Musa, don't you have Mr. Ken Ogeso for that role at State House?
There are so many categories of advisors to be able to be anchored properly.
Thank you, Wakili. Unfortunately, today we do not have a Kenyan or a leader who has distinguished himself for us to celebrate him or her on this show. But even as we come to the end of the show, your parting shot, especially on the Herculean task ahead of the cabinet secretaries. Let me start with you, Dismus, then I'll finish with you, Wakili.
I go first?
Yes. Ladies first.
Okay. I think as a country, we've come very far from our days of independence. The people who came before us did what they had to do to ensure that we got here. We have a responsibility, and I'm specifically speaking to the CSs. We have a responsibility to ensure that we leave a better Kenya for the people who come after us. Simple.
Dismus?
In my view, what the President Ruto's second cabinet must do is what lawyers say disclosure of material information. That they need to paint for us an accurate picture of where Kenya is and where Kenya needs to be, so that all Kenyans understand what is supposed to happen. If they're telling us to tighten our belts, or if it's about austerity measures, this must be communicated in clear English or clear mother tongue so that every Kenyan understands. And in the process of doing that, when they tell Mura to tighten a belt or embrace austerity, we should also see the public servants of rank doing the same. You cannot tell Mura to tighten a belt, and then you see these cabinet secretaries with a 10-vehicle convoy. Then we are not tightening our belt. So if everybody is going to tighten a belt, let us begin from the highest level. And then number two, as I see it, and I could be biased, our solution is economic diplomacy. Let's make Kenya an FDI destination. Let's export our talent, whether it's manual, skilled, or semi-skilled. And our coffee, our tea, let's get new markets. So that, at some stage, the Kenyan tea and the coffee, actually the Kenyan tea is the best in the world, but we have relied on our traditional markets. So one wonders what the folks at the Ministry of Agriculture and the relevant agencies are doing instead of opening up new markets. So they should go out and open new markets. This means that our ambassadors and their commissioners should consider giving, single malt whiskey and these cocktail parties a wide berth and do actual promotion. And I'm hoping that our ambassadors and their commissioners, some of their key performance indicators would be how they promote Kenya as an FDI destination, how they open markets for Kenyan goods and services, but more important, and I suspect some of you are going to roll eyes, how we create opportunities for Kenyan talents abroad.
As long as it's not manual labor.
No. Because you do manual labor in Kenya, you pick tea in our islands.
You pick tea in Colombia.
You go pick the tea in Colombia, provided you register with our mission, and provided that if anybody pinches your nose, the Kenyan government lands on them with a heavy rungu.
Wakili, your closing remarks?
Well, I wish them all the best, but what I would say is that all these nice things are saying is that cabinet is a tool of political stability, and whether they perform or not is neither here or there. The performance will be by the technocrats in the ministry, and actually the performance is by the president himself. He provides the leadership, and he says that I want these things done. and it will be done. And the most thing, the thorn in the flesh of this government or any other government is corruption. If we are able to tame corruption in government, then we are going far. Because that is the emerging point that we have in this country. So if the president will be able to provide leadership, that there will be no corruption in state departments, ministries, and everyone, and those who have been accused of that, the institutions in place should be able to take that responsibility from PCI to corruption. And the judiciary, I think the judiciary is also our weakest point. Most of the cases are being dismissed because maybe, or they are taking longer time. I wouldn't blame the judiciary, but for example, the investigating agencies, they take you to court with an intention for you to be acquitted. So I think, have you ever prosecuted a case where the end of the game is that you will be acquitted? It's an acquittal. So I think the point is that if the president gets right in this issue of corruption, then we will go far as a country. Because this budgeted corruption, without that zero-based budget, would be a good starting point. And if we budget corruption, that we're going to put money for Dismus in a budget, which we are financing as taxpayers, that's the end of it. And so I think the most important thing is the president should be able to carry the big stick and whip all these guys who are accused or who are being suspected of corrupt activity.
Before Professor gives the final remarks, you remember the case in the UK? People were accused of taking part in riots, violent disorder.
Yes.
Their matters were determined within a week. That's the efficiency you're talking about, the judiciary.
Exactly.
Because there are some people in the private sector today who complain that their matters take long to settle, so resources are tied within banks.
But you see, you forget that the UK Prime Minister was a prosecutor. Maybe we need a prosecutor for our president.
But I think even as we come to the end, Wakili, the point you made about corruption, I think it's something that is ringing in the minds of so many Kenyans. Yeah. And probably the president must have picked that because in his address to the new cabinet, he was very clear that one of the key things that they must do is to accelerate the fight against corruption. And from where I see it, I think once we get corruption nipped at the bud, at the point of budgeting for corruption, then once we get these cabinet secretaries, just deliver even 50% of the promises that the president made. I still believe that the president of this republic found himself in a precarious position because of the many promises that he made and the high expectations that the young people had of this regime. The fact that people went out and voted for this regime is to a large extent a factor of what they had in the manifesto and the many things that he used to say on top of the range cards. And young Kenyans in this country keep circulating the promises that he made. And I think it is incumbent upon the cabinet, and we've agreed here that the cabinet is a political tool. The technocrats should do the job and deliver on bulk of the promises that the president made, deliver on what would help Kenyans live a comfortable and dignified life, irrespective of where they are, deliver on getting the Kenyans to realize most of their aspirations. Even as we come to the end, we must say that there is light at the end of the tunnel. We've had cabinet secretaries who reduce the opulence that we used to see. Seeing a new breed of cabinet secretaries join the fore, throw themselves to the deep end, and probably it can only get better. But as I always say, if they don't deliver, it's very simple. Kenyans have a very simple decision come 2027. Ship all of them out. Right now, we are coming to the end. This is The Far Side. Keep following us every Sunday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. We are live here on YouTube. Follow us, The FiresideKE on YouTube, The FiresideKE on Facebook, and at The FiresideKE on X. Until we meet next time, it's been a great evening. Enjoy yourselves and have yourselves a beautiful evening. See you next time.